What if one of the most powerful cancer fighting mechanisms in your body is not found in a hospital, not inside a prescription bottle, and not even in a complex medical procedure, but instead is already operating inside you every single morning before you eat anything? And what if the real difference between health and disease, between silence and danger at a cellular level, is being shaped by habits you repeat before 9 a.m. without even realizing their impact? To understand this, you have to start with a reality most people never hear in a clear way. By middle age, especially after 50, the human body almost never exists in a completely cancer-free microscopic sense. Autopsy research has shown that a large portion of men in their 50s already carry tiny microscopic prostate cancer clusters. A significant percentage of women in their 40s and 50s carry similar microscopic changes in breast tissue. And as we move into older age, small cancerous cell clusters can even appear in organs like the thyroid. But here is the part that changes everything. Most of these microscopic cancer formations never become dangerous. They don't spread, they don't grow aggressively, they remain silent, controlled, and inactive for decades in many cases. And the reason is not luck. It is not random chance. It is because your body has built-in defense systems that actively suppress their growth every single day. The real question is not whether these cells exist. The real question is what determines whether they stay asleep or wake up. And the answer comes down to one powerful idea: the environment inside your body. Cancer cells are not foreign invaders like bacteria or viruses. They are not something that simply enters from outside. Instead, they are already present in many people in small, dormant clusters. Their survival depends entirely on conditions. If the environment is right, they stay inactive. If the environment becomes favorable, they begin to grow. That environment is shaped by very specific biological signals: high blood sugar, elevated insulin, chronic inflammation, poor metabolic control, and disrupted cellular cleanup systems. When these signals are constantly present, something that is increasingly common in modern lifestyles, those dormant cells are given exactly what they need to survive and expand. But when those conditions are reversed, something very different happens. When blood sugar stays stable, when insulin remains low, when inflammation drops, and when the body activates its internal cleanup systems, those same cancer cells are essentially starved of support. They remain silent, contained, and often permanently inactive. This is where one of the most important biological systems in your body comes into play: angiogenesis. It is the process your body uses to create new blood vessels. This process is essential for life. It heals wounds, supports growth, and keeps organs functioning. Without it, the body could not repair itself. But angiogenesis also has a darker side when it becomes unregulated, because for any cancer cell cluster to grow beyond microscopic size, it must build its own blood supply. Without blood vessels feeding it oxygen and nutrients, it cannot expand or survive long term. When it manages to trigger new vessel growth around itself, that is when it becomes dangerous. Your body, under healthy conditions, has mechanisms that suppress this abnormal blood vessel growth. It keeps microscopic cancer clusters isolated and starved. But when metabolic balance is disrupted, especially through diet, insulin spikes, and chronic inflammation, that protective system becomes weaker. This is why what you do every morning matters more than most people realize, because the early hours of the day are when your metabolism is most responsive, your hormones are shifting, and your internal environment is either being stabilized or disrupted. And that sets the tone for everything that follows. In this video, we are going to break down 6 deeply important biological insights that explain how your morning habits influence this entire system. From fasting and insulin control to autophagy, anti-inflammatory foods, and even sunlight exposure, each piece plays a role in whether your body stays in a protective state or a vulnerable one. And the most important idea to keep in mind is this: your body is not passive in this process. It is actively trying to protect you every single day. The question is whether your lifestyle is supporting that protection or interfering with it. Now, let's move into the first major biological mechanism that makes this possible and understand how your body already knows how to control cancer growth through something called angiogenesis. To really understand how your morning habits influence long-term cancer risk, you need to look deeper at one of the most important biological systems operating inside your body right now, angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is the process your body uses to grow new blood vessels. On the surface, this sounds simple, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful, life-sustaining mechanisms you have. Every time your body heals a wound, repairs tissue, or supports organ function, angiogenesis is at work. Without it, survival would not be possible, but there is a critical second side to this same system, and this is where the connection to cancer becomes important. Cancer cells, even in their earliest microscopic form, cannot grow beyond a very limited size unless they are able to secure their own blood supply. They need oxygen, nutrients, and energy delivery systems, and the only way they get that is by triggering angiogenesis around them. This process, when hijacked by abnormal cells, is known as pathological angiogenesis. It is not the normal, balanced vessel growth your body uses for healing. It is an uncontrolled, misdirected version that feeds abnormal tissue instead of healthy function. Think of it like a garden system. In a healthy garden, water flows where it is needed, plants grow in balance, and everything is regulated. But if a weed manages to tap into a constant water supply, it stops being small and harmless. It begins to spread, dominate space, and choke everything around it. Cancer behaves in a very similar way. The microscopic clusters of abnormal cells that exist in many adults do not automatically become dangerous. In fact, most of them remain dormant for life. The reason is simple. They are being kept in check. They are isolated. They are not receiving enough blood flow to expand. Your body is actively suppressing their ability to grow new vessels. This is where the science becomes both fascinating and practical. Researchers have identified that angiogenesis is not random. It is controlled by signals inside your body. Some signals promote blood vessel growth, while others inhibit it. The balance between these signals determines whether abnormal cells stay dormant or begin to progress. One of the most influential voices in this field is Dr. William Li, a physician and researcher who has spent years studying how food and metabolism influence angiogenesis. His work has shown that certain natural compounds found in everyday foods can actively support the body's ability to regulate blood vessel growth in a healthy direction. This means your daily choices, what you eat, how long you fast, how your metabolism behaves in the morning, are not just about energy or weight. They are directly involved in whether your internal environment is supportive or suppressive toward abnormal cell growth. When the body is in a balanced state, angiogenesis is tightly controlled. Damaged cells are isolated. Abnormal clusters are starved of supply. But when the body is under constant metabolic stress, high sugar intake, frequent eating, insulin spikes, inflammation, that control system becomes weaker. In that state, the environment becomes more favorable for unwanted vessel growth. And this is exactly why the morning period matters so much. After a night of fasting, your body is in a naturally low insulin, low glucose state. Cellular repair systems are active. Inflammation is lower. Angiogenesis regulation is functioning more efficiently. It is one of the cleanest metabolic windows of the entire day. But that state is fragile. It can be disrupted very quickly by what you consume first thing in the morning. A high sugar breakfast or a fast spike in insulin can shift your body out of this protective mode in a matter of minutes. That shift changes the internal environment that angiogenesis depends on. This is not about fear or extremes. It is about understanding balance. Your body already has the tools to control abnormal cell growth. The goal is not to introduce something new, but to stop interfering with the systems already in place. When you begin to see angiogenesis as a controlled switch rather than a random process, the importance of morning habits becomes much clearer. You are either supporting a state where unwanted growth is suppressed, or you are accidentally creating conditions where that suppression weakens. And this brings us to the next critical factor. What happens during the overnight fast and why the hours before your first meal are one of the most powerful metabolic windows for protecting this balance. If angiogenesis explains how your body controls blood supply to abnormal cells, then the next piece of the puzzle is understanding what happens when you simply stop eating for a period of time. Because what most people think of as not eating breakfast is actually one of the most biologically powerful states your body can enter. This is called the overnight fast, and it is not just a break from food, it is a shift in your entire internal chemistry. When you stop eating after dinner and go through the night without food, your body begins to move into a different metabolic mode. Blood glucose levels gradually stabilize, insulin drops, growth signaling slows down, and the body's no longer focused on storing energy, it shifts into repair and maintenance. This is where things become especially important in the context of cancer biology. One of the key drivers of cell growth in the body is insulin. Its primary job is to help move glucose from the bloodstream into cells. That function is essential for survival. But insulin is also a growth signal. It doesn't just regulate energy, it tells cells to grow, divide, and store resources. In a healthy, balanced system, this process is tightly controlled. Insulin rises after meals, then falls back to baseline. But in modern lifestyles, frequent snacking, high sugar intake, late night eating, insulin is often elevated far more often than it should be. And here is where the connection becomes critical. If microscopic cancer cell clusters are already present in the body, elevated insulin creates a biochemical environment that can support their growth. It is not the sole cause, but it acts like a signal that says resources are available. Now, compare that to the fasting state. During a proper overnight fast, typically 12 to 14 hours without food, insulin levels remain low for an extended period. This changes everything at a cellular level. Instead of growth mode, the body shifts into repair mode. Energy is drawn from stored reserves. Inflammation begins to decrease. And most importantly, growth signaling is reduced. Recent scientific studies have shown that time-restricted eating patterns can significantly influence metabolic hormones like insulin, glucose, and insulin-like growth factors. These are all deeply connected to how cells behave, including abnormal or precancerous cells. This is why the timing of your last meal matters just as much as the content of your first meal. If you finish eating late at night and then eat again immediately upon waking, you barely give your body any time in this low insulin repair-oriented state. But if you extend that window into the morning, something different happens. You allow your body to complete internal cleanup processes that are otherwise interrupted by constant feeding. And this is where the concept of metabolic environment becomes central again. Cancer cells do not operate independently of your physiology. They respond to the same signals as normal cells. They respond to availability of fuel. They respond to hormonal signals. They respond to inflammation levels. When insulin is consistently high, glucose is abundant, and the body is in constant feeding mode, those conditions become supportive of growth in general. That includes unwanted growth, but when insulin is kept low for longer periods and the body cycles into fasting regularly, the internal environment becomes less supportive of uncontrolled cell activity. This is not about starving the body. It is about restoring natural rhythms that modern life often disrupts. And one of the most important misunderstandings people have is thinking that breakfast is always required immediately after waking. In reality, your body does not suddenly become dependent on food the moment your eyes open. It continues running on stored energy, and in many cases, benefits from extended fasting periods in the morning. However, there is a critical detail here that often gets missed. It is not only about how long you fast, but also about how you break the fast. Because once you do eat, your body responds immediately. Hormones shift, insulin rises, metabolism adjusts, and that transition can either support the protective state your body has been in, or it can rapidly undo it. This is where many people unintentionally make a mistake. They break their fast with foods that cause a rapid spike in blood sugar. And that spike is not just an energy event, it is a hormonal signal that changes the entire internal environment. To understand why this matters so much, we need to look at what happens when fasting ends too aggressively and how the first meal of the day can either continue a protective metabolic state or completely reverse it within minutes. That is exactly what we will explore next, because the way you break your fast may be just as important as the fast itself. After a night of fasting, your body is in a very specific and highly sensitive metabolic state. Insulin's low, blood sugar is stable, and internal repair systems are active. In this condition, your body is not focused on storage or rapid growth. It is focused on balance, cleanup, and recovery. This is one of the most protective physiological states you can be in, especially when it comes to long-term cellular health. But it is also a fragile state, and what you do in the first meal after fasting can either preserve it or completely disrupt it within minutes. This is where the so-called morning insulin trap comes into play. To understand it, you need to see what actually happens when you break a fast. The moment you eat food, especially carbohydrates or sugar-heavy items, your digestive system responds immediately. Glucose enters the bloodstream, insulin is released to manage it, and that entire low insulin environment you built overnight begins to shift rapidly. Now, that shift is not inherently bad. It is a normal biological response. The problem arises when the spike is too large, too fast, and too frequent, because insulin is not only a metabolic regulator, it is also a growth signal. It communicates to cells that energy is available and that it is time to grow and divide. That includes normal cells, but also any abnormal or precancerous cells that may already exist in the background. This is where modern breakfast habits become important. Many common morning foods, sweetened cereals, pastries, fruit juices, flavored yogurts, and even some smoothies cause a rapid surge in blood glucose. That surge forces the body to release a strong insulin response to bring levels back down. From a cancer biology perspective, repeated spikes like this create an environment that is more favorable for cellular growth signals than for cellular stability. It does not mean cancer is being created instantly, but it does mean the internal environment is being shifted away from protection and towards stimulation. Now, compare that to a different approach. If the first meal after fasting is built around protein, healthy fats, and low glycemic foods, the response inside your body is very different. Blood sugar rises slowly instead of sharply. Insulin response is moderate instead of extreme, and the metabolic state you developed overnight is preserved for longer. Foods like eggs, avocado, nuts, olive oil, and plain Greek yogurt produce a far more controlled response. They provide energy without overwhelming the system. They also help maintain satiety and reduce unnecessary glucose fluctuations later in the day. Even small changes matter. For example, pairing fruit with protein or fat slows down glucose absorption. This prevents the sudden spikes that can disrupt metabolic balance. Berries, in particular, tend to have a lower glycemic impact compared to high sugar fruits, especially when consumed alongside other nutrients. The key idea here is not restriction, it is control. It is about avoiding unnecessary metabolic stress during a time when your body is still transitioning out of a fasting state. There is also a deeper layer to this involving something called the Warburg effect. This is a well-known observation in cancer metabolism, first identified nearly a century ago, which shows that cancer cells tend to rely heavily on glucose for energy, even when oxygen is available. This is why imaging techniques like PET scans use glucose to identify active cancer cells. They consume it at a much higher rate than normal cells. What this means in practical terms is simple. Large, repeated glucose spikes create more fuel availability in the bloodstream. While this does not directly cause cancer, it does provide a more favorable energy environment for abnormal cells that already exist. This is why the first meal of the day carries so much weight. It sets the metabolic tone for everything that follows. A stable start tends to lead to a more stable day. A chaotic start often leads to more fluctuations in energy, hunger, and insulin response. So the goal is not to fear food in the morning. The goal is to be intentional about how the body transitions from fasting to feeding. Once you understand this, breakfast is no longer just a meal, it becomes a metabolic decision point, and this leads directly into the next layer of the system, specific foods that don't just avoid harm, but actively support the body's natural ability to regulate blood vessel growth, reduce inflammation, and maintain a protective internal environment. Once you understand how insulin, fasting, and blood sugar shape your internal environment, the next question becomes even more important. Are there specific foods that actively support your body's natural defenses rather than just avoiding harm? The answer, according to growing research in metabolic and nutritional science, is yes. Certain everyday foods contain compounds that influence one of the most important processes in cancer biology, angiogenesis, the regulation of blood vessel growth. To understand why this matters, think back to the core idea we've been building. Cancer cells do not grow in isolation. They depend on a support system, and that support system is blood supply. If that supply is restricted or controlled, their growth remains limited. If it expands, so does the potential for progression. This is where anti-angiogenic foods become relevant. These are foods that contain natural compounds which help the body regulate abnormal blood vessel growth and support a more balanced internal environment. One of the most studied examples is green tea. It contains a powerful compound called EGCG, which has been widely researched for its effects on cellular processes, inflammation, and blood vessel formation. In laboratory studies, EGCG has shown the ability to interfere with signals that promote unwanted vessel growth. This does not mean green tea is a treatment, but it does mean it contributes to a biological environment that is less favorable to uncontrolled cellular expansion. Another important example is tomatoes, especially when cooked. Tomatoes contain lycopene, a natural antioxidant that has been associated with supportive effects in prostate health research. What many people don't realize is that cooking tomatoes actually increases the availability of lycopene, making it easier for the body to absorb. When combined with a small amount of healthy fat like olive oil, absorption improves even further. Then there are foods like berries, walnuts, and leafy greens. These are not powerful in isolation as miracle foods, but they contribute to a consistent pattern: lower inflammation, better metabolic stability, and improved antioxidant support. Over time, this creates a less hostile environment for normal cellular function and a less supportive environment for abnormal growth signals. What is especially important here is not individual foods, but combinations. Research in nutrition science increasingly shows that food synergy matters. In other words, the effect of multiple foods eaten together can be stronger than the effect of any single food on its own. For example, combining healthy fats with antioxidant rich vegetables improves nutrient absorption. Pairing protein with fiber slows glucose release. Drinking green tea alongside a balanced meal may support metabolic regulation more effectively than consuming it in isolation. Even coffee, when consumed without sugar or excessive additives, contains compounds like chlorogenic acids that may support insulin sensitivity and metabolic balance. The key distinction is preparation. The same beverage that supports metabolic health in one form can become disruptive in another if loaded with sugar or syrups. What all of this points to is a shift in perspective. Food is not just energy, it is a collection of biological signals that influence how your body behaves at a cellular level. When those signals consistently support stability, steady blood sugar, lower inflammation, controlled insulin response, the internal environment becomes more regulated. And in that regulated state, the body is better equipped to keep abnormal cell activity under control. But food is only one part of the morning equation. Because even if nutrition is optimized, there is another system operating in the background that plays a major role in cellular health: your body's internal cleanup mechanism, which works most actively during the fasting window and early morning hours. This process is called autophagy, and it is one of the most important biological defenses your body has against damaged or dysfunctional cells. Understanding how it works will completely change how you think about sleep, fasting, and even the timing of your first meal. And that is exactly what we will explore next because this is where your body's natural repair system becomes fully active. If everything we've discussed so far explains how your morning habits influence metabolic signals like insulin, glucose, and inflammation, then this final piece explains something even deeper: how your body physically cleans itself at a cellular level while you sleep. This process is called autophagy, and it is one of the most important built in survival systems your body has ever evolved. The word autophagy literally means self eating, but the meaning is not destructive, it is actually protective. It refers to the body's ability to identify damaged, worn out, or dysfunctional cellular components and break them down so they can be recycled or removed. Think of it as an internal maintenance system that runs silently in the background. During the day, your cells are constantly working, they generate energy, process nutrients, and respond to environmental stress. In that process, small amounts of cellular damage naturally accumulate, proteins become misfolded, mitochondria lose efficiency, and waste products build up inside cells. If this damage were never addressed, it would gradually impair function and increase biological risk over time. Autophagy prevents that from happening. Here is the key point: autophagy becomes most active during periods of fasting, particularly overnight. When you are not eating, insulin levels drop, growth signals decrease, and the body shifts from a storage and growth mode into a repair and recycling mode. This is why the overnight fast is not just about digestion, it is about giving your body uninterrupted time to clean itself. Scientific research, including Nobel Prize winning work on autophagy mechanisms, has shown that this process plays a crucial role in maintaining cellular health. One of its most important functions is identifying and removing damaged cellular components that could, if left unchecked, contribute to dysfunction or abnormal growth. In simple terms, autophagy acts like a quality control system. It scans your cells, removes what is no longer functioning properly, and helps recycle usable material for future use. Now, connect this back to everything we've discussed so far. When autophagy is active during the night and early morning, and when insulin remains low due to fasting, your body is operating in one of its most protective internal states. Damaged cells are being cleaned up, inflammation is lower, growth signals are reduced, and metabolic balance is more stable. But the moment you eat, especially if you break your fast with a high sugar or high insulin spiking meal, autophagy rapidly decreases. The body shifts focus from cleanup to nutrient processing and storage. This is not a bad thing. It is a natural transition. But timing matters. The longer and more consistently you allow autophagy to run each night, the more opportunity your body has to maintain internal balance. This is why practices like time restricted eating have gained attention in recent scientific research. Studies have shown that limiting food intake to a consistent daily window can influence not just weight and metabolism, but also cellular repair processes, energy levels, and overall physiological stability. But autophagy alone is not the full story, because what happens after you wake up also matters just as much as what happens during sleep. The first 30 minutes of your day play a powerful role in setting your hormonal rhythm. Cortisol naturally rises in the morning to help you wake up and mobilize energy. This is normal and healthy, but if this natural rise is combined with stress, screen exposure, poor light conditions, or immediate food intake, it can create a disrupted metabolic pattern that affects the rest of the day. This is why simple morning behaviors matter more than most people realize. Exposure to natural light helps regulate your circadian rhythm. Light movement helps stabilize glucose levels. Delaying food for a short period extends the fasting benefits. And avoiding immediate stress or digital overload helps prevent unnecessary hormonal spikes. When combined, these actions reinforce each other. Fasting supports autophagy. Autophagy supports cellular cleanup. Stable insulin supports metabolic balance. Anti inflammatory foods support long-term regulation. And circadian alignment supports hormonal stability. None of this requires extreme behavior. It requires consistency. The real takeaway is not that you must change everything overnight, but that small, repeated morning decisions shape the internal environment your body operates in every single day. And that environment determines whether abnormal cells remain dormant or are given conditions that allow growth. So the question is no longer about a single food, a single supplement, or a single habit. It is about the pattern you build every morning. Do you start your day in a way that supports stability, repair, and balance? Or do you unintentionally create conditions that work against those systems? Your body already knows how to protect itself. It already has angiogenesis regulation, insulin control, autophagy, and circadian rhythm systems working in your favor. The goal is not to override them. The goal is to stop interfering with them. And that brings everything full circle because the most powerful cancer related insight is not fear, it is awareness. And the most powerful action is not complexity, it is consistency. What you do tomorrow morning before breakfast is not a small detail. It is part of a long term biological pattern that shapes how your body behaves at the deepest level. And that is where real change begins.